The ship was dead. It floated in the dark like a broken toy, spinning very slowly, its lights gone and its engines cold. The hull was burned black on one side, and pieces of metal drifted around it, like crumbs from a crushed biscuit. Anyone who saw it from far away would think there was nothing left inside worth saving. Corporal Eli Ward did not think that. He thought nothing at all at first. He just did his job. Eli was 29 years old. He was not tall, but he was wide in the chest and strong in the arms, with short brown hair and a face that had seen too much sun on too many bad worlds. He had been in the Human Expeditionary Corps for 6 years. He had fought on 3 frontier planets, survived all 3, and recently been given the worst assignment in the unit: salvage duty. This was his punishment for hitting an officer. The officer had ordered a whole group of civilians left behind during an evacuation. Eli had disagreed with his fists. The officer had lived. Eli had been demoted and sent to pick through dead ships at the edge of known space. It was not the kind of work that made him and feel proud. But Eli did it without complaint, because that was how he did most things. The ship they were searching was a colony transport, the kind used by smaller species to move families and supplies between systems. The Galactic Coalition had logged it as destroyed in a kinetic engagement, which was their careful, polished way of saying someone had shot it apart. No one was claiming responsibility. No one was looking very hard. Eli and his team floated through the upper decks in their suits, mag boots, clicking against the warped floors. The team leader, a stocky man named Derek, was directing the catalog work 2 levels above. Eli had been sent down alone to check the lower cargo hold. The order was simple: confirm it was empty, log it, come back up. The hold was not empty. Eli moved his light across the space. Slowly. Most of it was rubble, collapsed panels, scattered crates, a tangle of torn wiring hanging from the ceiling like dead roots. The air recyclers had shut down long ago. Everything was still. Then the light caught something behind the far bulkhead. A shape, small, tucked into the corner where 2 collapsed walls made a narrow triangle of shelter. Eli stopped walking. He did not reach for his weapon. He just stood there for a moment, watching. The shape breathed. He moved closer, slow and careful, the way he had learned to move when he did not want something hurt to run. As he got nearer, the light filled in the details. It was a child, small enough to be mistaken for a human. Child of 10 years, but clearly not human. The skin was pale gray-white, the kind of color that had never seen sunlight. The hair was black and tangled, matted down with dried ichor that had gone dark brown. The ears tapered to fine points above the skull. The lips were slightly parted, and at the corners, barely visible, were 2 very small, very sharp teeth. A vampire child. Eli had seen vampiri before, twice from a distance. He knew what the Coalition said about them. He knew about Resolution 7 Alpha, the one that had been passed 18 months ago. The one that called the vampiri hostile, non-citizen entity subject to containment. He knew what that really meant. Everyone knew. The vampiri homeworld had been burning for almost a year. Ships full of their people had gone missing in Coalition-controlled space. Those who asked too many questions were told to stop asking. The child was wearing a pressure suit. That was 3 sizes too large for her. The life support light on the collar was blinking red. She was running out of time. Her eyes opened. They were silver, the color of a coin, held up to the moon, and they were enormous, and they were terrified. Eli crouched down immediately. He made himself small. He held his hands out where she could see them open, no weapon. He looked at her face and nodded at the door behind him. He said quietly, "Hey, I'm not going to hurt you." Her eyes did not move from his face. She did not speak. She pressed herself harder against the bulkhead, but she did not run, maybe because there was nowhere to run to, or maybe because some part of her, the part that had been alone in the cold dark long enough, had run out of the energy for it. Eli stayed down. He counted his breaths the way he had learned to count them in bad situations. Slow in, slow out, no hurry. He watched her chest. Her breathing was shallow and fast, the breathing of someone who had been afraid for a very long time without rest. Slowly, over the next few minutes, it slowed down. He did not speak again right away. He just stayed where he was, low and still and present, until she had looked at him long enough to start to understand that he was not moving toward her, not reaching, not calling for anyone. Then his calm crackled. Derek's voice came down from above. "Ward, status on the lower hold." Eli looked at the child. She flinched at the sound of the voice, pressing back against the wall, the silver eyes going wide again. Eli pressed the comm button on his wrist. "Hold is empty," he said. "Nothing down here. Logging it clear." A pause. "Copy that. Come back up when you're done." "On my way," Eli said. He clicked off the comm and looked at the girl again. She was staring at him. Her head was tilted slightly to one side, like she was trying to understand something that did not fit the shape of any word she had. Eli reached slowly into the side pouch of his suit and took out an emergency oxygen patch, the small kind, the kind that could buy a suit another few hours. He held it out toward her. He did not move his feet. Just his arm extended, the patch resting flat on his palm. For a long moment she did not move. Then very slowly she reached out and took it. Her fingers were cold even through his glove. She pressed the patch to her collar and the blinking light steadied, going from red to yellow. Not safe yet, but better. Eli stood up. He looked at her one more time. Then he turned and bent down, presenting his back to her, and waited. It was the oldest signal he knew, the one that said, "I am not a threat. Here is the most vulnerable part of me. You choose." After a moment he felt 2 small hands grip his shoulders. He carried her out of the hold, tucked against his back, hidden by his suit and the angle of his body, moving through the wreckage and back up through the ship with steady, even steps, as though he were carrying nothing at all. When they reached the airlock, he stepped through alone in the logs. He had already decided. He did not know what it would cost him. He knew it would cost him something. He carried her anyway through the airlock and into the shuttle and under a spare emergency blanket in the back locker, and he sat down in the pilot seat and began to fill out the salvage report. Lower cargo hold empty. Nothing of value recovered. He hit submit and did not look back and flew them both away from the dead ship and into the dark dot. She did not speak for 11 days. Eli had found them a room on station. Delara 9, a waypoint hub at the edge of Coalition-monitored space. It was the kind of place where people asked few questions because most of the people there had their own answers to hide. The station was old, always a little cold, and smelled of recycled air and engine grease. The room was small, a bed, a cot, narrow kitchen counter, one window that looked out onto a maintenance corridor. It was not much. It was enough. The landlord was a woman named Lou. She was heavy-set and direct, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen a great many things without being surprised by them. When Eli introduced the child as his ward-sick half-breed recovering from transit, Lou had looked at the pale skin and silver eyes for a long, careful moment. Then she had taken his credits, handed him a key, and brought them an extra blanket without being asked. Eli did not know how to thank her for that. He simply nodded, and she nodded back. And that was enough between two people who understood how much silence can mean. The girl Nira, though he did not know her name yet, was not violent. She was not dangerous in any of the ways the Coalition's warnings described. She was quiet and watchful and very, very tired. She slept the first 2 days almost completely, curled on the cot with the blanket pulled up to her ears, and Eli sat in the chair by the window and read old mission logs and pretended he was not listening to every sound she made. She ate on the 3rd day. He put a bowl of protein ration near the cot and moved away. She ate it all when she thought he was not looking. He refilled it and moved away again. By the 5th day, she was sitting up. By the 6th, she followed him to the kitchen area and stood at the edge of it, watching him work. Eli cooked the way soldiers cook. Simple, fast, without caring much about flavor. He boiled water, added powder, stirred. He set a bowl on the counter without looking at her. She took it, went back to the cot, ate it. He washed the pan and did not comment. He learned her name on the 7th day. He did not learn it from her. He found it on the inside of the pressure suit collar, carved in small, careful marks, vampiric script, neat and deliberate. He photographed it and ran it through a translation database he had downloaded before leaving the Corps. It took a while to find the right match. When he did, he sat with it for a moment. Nira. It meant something close to the one who returns from the dark. He did not say it out loud. Not yet. He folded the information away and kept it with him. On the 9th day, he was cleaning his equipment at the table when he noticed she had moved her cot closer to the wall that faced the door. It was a small thing, but it told him something. She was thinking about exits, about what came next. She was not just surviving hour to hour anymore. She was starting to think forward. That meant something. On the 10th day, she watched him from across the room for almost 2 hours, without moving. He let her watch. He did not perform anything for her. He just did what he would have done anyway. Checked the scanner, ate, read, cleaned. When he went to sleep, he left the small desk light on because he had noticed she rested easier when there was a little light. On the 11th day, she spoke. It was evening. Eli was sitting by the window with a cup of cold coffee. The station outside hummed and clicked, a way stations do when everything is working but nothing is well. He was not looking at her. She said in a voice that was rough from not being used, with an accent that pulled the vowels long and cut the ends of words short. You did not tell them. Eli did not react with surprise. He had been waiting in a patient way for whenever this happened. He said no. Why? He thought about it the way he thought about most things that mattered without rushing it. Then he said, because you were not hurting anyone, and they would have hurt you. She was quiet for a moment. Then you broke a rule. I broke a lot of rules, Eli said. It's something I do. She looked at him. The silver eyes were steady now, not wide with fear like when he had first found her. They were measuring, thinking. My mother told me that humans were the most dangerous beings in known space. She said. She was right, Eli said. She said it was not because of your weapons. Neera paused, forming the words carefully. She said it was because of your choices, that no other species chooses the way humans choose, that a human can decide on their own, with no one watching, to become something different from what they were. Todd. Eli looked at his coffee cup. Your mother sounds like she was a wise person. She was. The words came out flat and precise, the way words come out when a person has already broken them down into small pieces to make them bearable. She died when they burned the station 11 weeks ago. Eli set down the cup. He did not say he was sorry, because sorry was a small word for a large wound, and he had never liked offering small words for large wounds. He did not say it would be all right, because he did not know if it would be. He did not say anything. He just stayed where he was, present, not filling the room with noise, not rushing away from what she had said, the way people sometimes did when grief made them uncomfortable. He sat in the chair by the window and let the silence be what it was, not empty but full of something that did not need to be spoken. Neera sat on her cot and looked at the wall for a long time. At some point, without either of them deciding it, the room became a place where she was allowed to be said. Not fixed, not managed, just said in company, which is the smallest and most important kindness one person can offer another. Later, Eli made food again. She ate all of it. She went asleep before he did, and for the first time in 11 days, she did not wake up once in the middle of the night. He sat in the chair and watched the door until morning, the way he had done every night since he carried her off the ship. It was not something he decided to do. It was just something he did. Outside, the station turned slowly in the dark, and inside that small, cold room, something that had not yet been named began quietly to take root. The man's name was Cray. He arrived on Delara 9 on a Tuesday, which Eli only noticed because Tuesdays were when Lou brought fresh water canisters to each room, and he had been standing at the door when the men stepped off the transit pod at the far end of the corridor. Something about the way Cray walked made Eli close his door quietly and go straight to the scanner. Cray was lean, with tidy dark hair and a face that had practiced being pleasant for so long that it had become the default. He wore a gray coat with no markings, but the coat was too clean for the station, and his boots were too new, and he moved through the corridor like a man who already knew the layout. Those were all small things. Together they added up to one large thing: coalition intelligence. Eli had 4 hours before Cray knocked on his door. He used them well. The first thing he did was tell Neera. She was sitting cross-legged on her cot, working through a basic language workbook he had found at the stations. Small supply exchange. She had been teaching herself to read common tongue with a focus and discipline that still surprised him. He told her plainly, without drama, that a coalition agent had arrived and was likely looking for her. He told her what he needed her to do. Stay in the back room, stay quiet, and if she heard him say the word maintenance, she was to open the window and climb into the access shaft he had already checked and marked for her. She closed the workbook. She looked at him. She said, "All right." That was all. No panic. No questions that couldn't wait. He had noticed this about her. She did not spend energy on things that could not be helped right now. She saved it for the things that could. It was a quality he respected enormously. The second thing he did was move everything that connected her to this room. Her cot, her few clothes, the pressure suit, all of it went into a locked storage case that he wedged behind the water recycler in the bathroom. The room, when he was done, looked like a man living alone. The third thing he did was go to the market and buy food for one and carry it back slowly, taking the long route, nodding to people he recognized, making himself visible and ordinary. By the time he came back, there were two men sitting at the entrance to his corridor. They were trying to look like they were not watching the corridor. They were not very good at it. Eli counted 3 total when he entered his room. 1 at the corridor entrance, 1 in a maintenance alcove across the walkway, and 1 Cray himself standing near the wall display looking at the public transit schedule with the deep interest of a man who had no interest in transit at all. Cray knocked at 6:00 in the evening. Eli opened the door. He leaned against the frame with his arms loose at his sides, relaxed in the way that a man is relaxed when he has decided exactly what he is going to do and is no longer worried about it. Cray showed a badge. Coalition Investigation Unit. Eli looked at it and said nothing. "Mr. Ward," Cray said pleasantly. "Or is it still Corporal? I sometimes lose track with you. Expeditionary Fellows." "Mr. is fine," Eli said. "I'll be brief," Cray said. "We had reports of a vampire child recovered from wreckage in the transit corridor. Your salvage team was working that sector 4 weeks ago. Your name is on the logs," he smiled. "You logged the lower hold as empty." "It was empty," Eli said. "The thing is," Cray said in the voice of someone explaining something simple to someone patient, "we've tracked a biological signature from the wreckage to the station. It's faint, but our equipment is quite good." He let that sit for a moment. "We're not here to cause trouble, Mr. Ward. We just want the child." Eli looked at him. He thought about the 11 days of silence, the carved name on the collar, the way she had reached out with cold fingers to take the oxygen patch because she had decided somehow to trust him. Anyway, he thought about the word her mother had used, dangerous. He thought about choices. "I don't know anything about a vampire child," Eli said. Cray's smile did not move. "Housing a classified hostile entity carries a coalition sentence of 12 to 20 years, Mr. Ward. Aiding in concealment of 1 doubles it. I mention this not as a threat, but as information." "I appreciate the information," Eli said. A pause. Behind Eli, the room was silent. Niara had made herself invisible the way Only someone who had grown up learning how to be invisible could. He did not look back. "She's just a child," Cray said, and his voice changed a little, became something almost sincere, or a good imitation of sincere. "She'll be processed humanely. Rehabilitation programs. A supervised facility. It is a much better outcome than—" "I don't have a niece," Eli said, and something in him shifted, like a door swinging all the way open. "I told Lou she was my ward because I didn't want to explain. But that's not right either." He looked at Cray directly. "I have a daughter, and you're not taking her." Behind him, very small, barely a sound at all, he heard a breath. Quick and sharp, the kind of breath a person takes when something hits them without warning. Cray looked at him for a long moment. The pleasantness in his face did not disappear. It simply became something different. The pleasantness of a man recalculating. "You understand," Cray said quietly, "that this does not end well for you." "Most things don't," Eli said. He closed the door. He turned the lock. He stood with his back to the door for a moment, listening to the corridor. He heard Cray's footsteps move away. Slowly, unhurried, the steps of a man who is not done but is willing to wait. Then Eli turned around. Neera was standing in the inner doorway. She was very still. Her silver eyes were open wide, but not with fear this time. With something he did not immediately have a word for. He looked at her. "You all right?" She did not answer right away. Then she said, in a voice that was very careful and very quiet, "You said, daughter." "Yes," Eli said. "You did not have to say that." "I know," he said. "I said it because it's true. We need to move tonight. Can you be ready in an hour?" She looked at him for another long moment. Then she went to the bathroom and began pulling her things out from behind the water recycler. An hour later, they left through the maintenance shaft. They did not look back. That the ship was called the Valentine, and it smelled like engine oil and burnt coffee and something sweet that no one on board could ever trace to its source. It was a cargo hauler, long and ungraceful, built for moving things rather than looking nice doing it. The captain was a woman named Petra Cole. She was not tall, but she carried herself like someone who was, with square shoulders and a way of standing that made rooms feel smaller. She had gray starting at her temples and a scar along her jaw that she did not explain and no one asked about. Petra took payment without asking what it was payment for. She had a rule on her ship: you could ask about cargo, but you could not ask about passengers. Eli had found her through the last two useful contacts he had left from his core years. Both of them had said the same thing. Petra Cole runs quiet and she runs clean, and if you need to disappear, she is the best chance you have. They boarded the Volante at 2:00 in the morning through a loading dock on the lower level of Delara 9 that was not on any official map. Petra met them herself, looked at Eli, looked at Neera, said nothing, and led them to a cabin near the back of the ship. The cabin had 2 bunks, a narrow closet, and a small porthole. It was clean. The blankets were old but whole. Neera stood in the middle of it and looked around with the careful attention she gave to all new spaces, memorizing exits and angles, and then she chose the upper bunk and climbed up without a word. Eli took the lower. He lay on his back in the dark and listened to the ship come to life around Them the engines warming, the docking. Clamps releasing the low shutter as they began to move and felt something. In his chest loosened slightly, the way it loosens when you have been waiting for something bad to happen and you have moved for now just beyond its reach. Life on the Volante may settled into patterns over the first week. The crew was small, Petra an engineer named Cal, a navigator named Don who was quiet and tall and always seemed to be eating something, and a cargo handler named Pat who was older and moved slowly, but knew every inch of the ship better than anyone. None of them asked questions about Neera. Cal, who was the youngest of them and had 2 fingers missing from his left hand from a past he did not discuss, took one look at her on the second day and decided she was interesting. He started teaching her card games that afternoon. Neera learned the first game in about 20 minutes. She lost the first 3 rounds on purpose. Eli could tell because he had seen her watching the cards with the same focused stillness she used for everything, cataloging, counting, building a model in her head. On the 4th round she won without appearing to try. Cal sat back and stared at the table. He said, "She's been counting cards the whole time, hasn't she?" Eli said from across the mess, not looking up probably. Cal thought about this. Then he dealt another hand. "Right," he said. "Let's go again." Neera looked at Eli over Cal's shoulder. Eli raised his eyebrows slightly. She looked back at Cal and picked up her cards. She beat him 8 times before dinner. The days passed. They moved through transit lanes that Petra chose for being quiet rather than fast, routes that did not cross coalition checkpoints or skin stations. Eli spent most of his time with his route maps, building options, looking for safe settlements in neutral zone territory where a former corporal and a vampire child might stop moving for a while without being found. It was slow work. There were not many options. He worked through them anyway. Neera kept learning. Common tongue reading first, then writing, then the basics of ship mechanics, which Cal taught her without being asked, because he was the kind of person who found it easier to talk to someone while doing something. She absorbed everything quickly and did not show off about it. She asked clear questions and remembered every answer. Petra watched her, sometimes from a doorway or across the mess. She never said anything. Once, when Eli came to the bridge to discuss routing, Petra said without looking up from her controls, "She's going to be remarkable." Eli looked at the empty doorway where Neera had been standing a moment before. "He said she already is." Petra made a small sound that was not quite agreement and not quite disagreement and went back to her instruments. At night, Neera did not sleep easily. Eli knew this without ever commenting on it. He would lie in his bunk and hear her above him, not tossing or crying, just small movements, careful and quiet, the movements of someone who has taught herself to be unhappy without disturbing anyone. He stayed awake until she stilled. He never mentioned it in the morning. On the 12th night, the ship was very quiet. Dawn had cut the common area lights at 10:00, and the corridor outside was dark. Eli had been almost asleep when Neera's voice came down from the upper bunk, low and careful. "You call me your daughter," she said. Back on the station, when the agent came, Eli opened his eyes. "Yes. You said it like you meant it." "I did mean it." A pause. You did not know me very long. No, Eli said. But that's not always how it works, he thought for a moment. Sometimes you just know. She was quiet for a while. He waited because he had learned that. She needed space around her words. Then she said, "My people have a word. It is not the word for father by blood. It is a different word. It means the one who stayed when they did not have to." Eli was still. "I have been trying," she said, carefully, "to decide if it is the right word for you." And he said. A very long pause. Outside the porthole, stars moved slowly. Past. "I think," she said, "that it is." Eli looked at the underside of her bunk. For a while, he did not say anything because there was nothing that needed to be said. He just let it be true, the way true things should be allowed to simply be, without being dressed up or explained. Above him, Neera was quiet. And this time she stayed quiet for the rest of the night. The hearing was not held in any room that would appear on a coalition map. It took place on a transport sitting, dark on the far side of a neutral zone. Moon with its transponder off and its running lights cut. Outside, the moon was gray and silent. Inside, 7 people sat around a folding table under cold white light, and an 8th person stood at the front of the room and told the truth. Neera was 12 years old by the human age, reckoning she and Eli had agreed to use for her documents. She stood straight with her hands loose at her sides, and she spoke in common tongue without notes. The 7 people watching her were representatives of the surviving vampiric diaspora, people who had gotten out before the burning, who had spent the last 2 years scattered across neutral space, staying low, trying to survive. Some of them had not seen a vampiric child in over a year. Some of them looked at her the way people look at things they had stopped expecting to see. The woman who had organized the hearing was named Grace Holt. She had been a coalition legal officer for 11 years before she resigned and spent 8 months building what she called the recognition case, a formal legal challenge to Resolution 7 Alpha, the classification that had made the vampiric into targets. Grace was precise and tireless and had very little patience for anything that was not useful. When Eli had first contacted her through a careful chain of anonymous messages, she had responded in less than an hour. He had liked her immediately. Eli sat in the back row. He had been asked if he wanted to speak. He had said no. This was Neera's hearing, not his. He was there because she had asked him to be there, and because being where she needed him to be was, by this point, simply what he did. Neera spoke for 40 minutes. She described the transit corridor wreck, what she had seen and heard in the hours before Eli found her. She described the station where her mother had died, the guards at the exits, the fires that had started in the residential levels first. She gave dates, times, names where she had them. She spoke without crying, not because she was not sad. Eli knew she was sad, had seen her be sad in the quiet of their shared spaces, but because she had decided that this room needed facts more than it needed her tears, and so she gave it facts, clear and plain, and one after another, like stones. When she finished, one of the vampiri representative, an older male named Soren with deep-set silver eyes and gray at his temples, leaned forward and said something in vampiri. His voice was careful, almost gentle. Neera answered in the same language. Eli did not understand the words, but he understood the shape of her voice. It changed when she spoke. Vampiri became a little fuller, a little less careful, like a muscle that had been held tight for a long time and was finally allowed to stretch. Grace leaned over to Eli and said, quietly, he asked who taught her to stand in front of those who might want to harm her and speak without fear. She said, my father did. Eli looked at the table in front of him for a moment. Then he looked at the back of Niera's head, at the way she was standing, straight, settled, entirely herself, and felt something in his chest that had no name and did not need one. The legal proceedings that followed the hearing took 8 months. They moved slowly, the way large official things always move, grinding through objections and counter-filings and procedural delays. Cray appeared twice in the documentation, his name on 2 formal requests to have the case dismissed on grounds of coalition jurisdiction. Both requests were denied by the Neutral Zone Arbitration Council, which was a small victory and a surprising one. In the end, the resolution was not complete. The coalition was too large and too settled in its decisions for one case to take it all apart. But it was enough to matter. Vampiri diaspora communities in neutral zone territories were granted provisional protected status. The hostile non-citizen entity classification was suspended pending formal review. 3 coalition member states voted against the suspension. 4 voted for it. 1 abstained. Grace called it a victory. Eli believed her. The day the decision came through, Eli was standing at the window of the small apartment they had rented in a neutral zone settlement called Port Haven. It was a real apartment, not a ship cabin or a rented room. Niera had a bedroom of her own for the first time. She had spent 2 days arranging it to her satisfaction, moving the bed 3 times before it was in the right place. She came and stood beside him at the window. Outside, the settlement was going about its business, people moving along the walkways, a market stall unfolding below, the ordinary life of a place that was trying hard to be a place worth staying in. She said, it is not enough. No, Eli said. But it is something. Yes. They were quiet for a while. A group of children ran past on the walkway below, shouting at each other about something, the way children do. We will have to keep going, Niera said. There are still communities without protection. There are still cases being ignored. Grace says the review process could take years, and without pressure it will be quietly buried. She's right, Eli said. So we keep going. Yes. Niera looked out at the settlement. She was 12 years old and had already lived more difficulty than most people faced in a lifetime. She was also, and Eli thought about this sometimes in the quiet moments, one of the most capable people he had ever met. Not because she was special in the way of stories where special means untouchable, but because she had been given very hard things and had carried them without losing herself, and that was the realest kind of strength there was. She said, my mother used to say that what made humans dangerous was not their weapons or their numbers. She said it was the way a single human could choose on their own with no permission from anyone to be different from what they were raised to be. She paused. I have been thinking about that for 2 years. I know, Eli said. You mentioned it before. I mentioned it because I wanted you to Understand that she was describing you. Without ever having met you. She was describing exactly you. She looked at him. And I think there are more like you. I think most people do not know they are capable of choosing differently until something asks them to. And I think she stopped, formed the thought more carefully. I think that is what we should be looking for. Not just legal cases. People. One at a time. The ones who will choose. Eli looked at her. She looked back at him, steady and serious and 12 years old and more certain than anyone had a right to be. He said, "That's going to take a long time." "Yes," she said. "And it's going to be hard." "Yes," she said again. Outside, the children on the walkway had stopped running and were standing in a loose circle laughing at something. The market stall below had opened, and a small crowd was gathering. The settlement was alive and turning, full of people who were, in their own ways, trying. Eli Ward, former corporal demoted for doing the right thing, wanted in for coalition systems for continuing to do. It looked out at all of it and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that he knew exactly where he was supposed to be. "All right," he said. "Then that's what we do." Neera nodded once, the way she always nodded when something was decided, clean and final. Then she went to find Grace's contact details because there was work to do. And she was not the kind of person who waited to start it. Eli stood at the window a little longer. The sun of the neutral zone settlement was low and warm on the glass. Somewhere in the city, a bell rang the hour. He counted the rings, 6 of them, and then he went to put the kettle on. Because Neera worked better when there was something warm to drink, and he had learned her habits the way he had learned everything about her, slowly, quietly, by paying attention. Outside, the world went on. And inside, in a small apartment in a place that was trying to be worth staying in, a man and his daughter got ready to change it.